When Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett introduced the state's new photo voter ID law, his office said that 99% of eligible voters already had an acceptable form of ID. But a comparison between the state's list of registered voters and those holding Pennsylvania driver's licenses, the most common form of ID now required to vote, showed a significantly wider gap, just above 9% of the electorate. That is, over 750,000 people don't have the ID. It is a widespread problem, but not an evenly spread problem. The vast majority of people affected live in Philadelphia County to the east and Allegheny County, that's Pittsburgh, to the west. And the funny thing about those two counties is they proved to be Democratic strongholds in the '08 election. So if your goal was to limit Democratic voter turnout this election, how would you go about it? Well, you could pass a law making it harder for these people to vote if they don't have ID. So let's hear what happened from Pennsylvania's own House Majority Leader, Mike Trezay.
We are focused on making sure that we meet our obligations that we've talked about for years. Pro-Second Amendment, the Castle Doctrine's done. First pro-life legislation, abortion facility regulations in 22 years, done. Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania, done.
You're supposed to say that last part to yourself. The law is under fire from voters' rights groups like the ACLU and the Advancement Project. They filed a lawsuit, but a Commonwealth judge last week ruled against them, refusing to halt the implementation of the law. The plaintiffs appealed to the state Supreme Court, which agreed yesterday to expedite the case, set a new date for September 13th. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has taken a hard look at the law's constitutionality, and just this week, Governor Corbett's administration blasted the DOJ for prying where they say it has no business. Pennsylvania's general counsel wrote, quote, "In light of the absence of authority for your request for information, I question whether your inquiry is truly motivated by a desire to assess compliance with federal voting rights laws, or rather is fueled by political motivation." Political motivation, huh? Pot, meat, kettle. Joining me now is Judith Brown-Dianis, co-director of the Advancement Project, and Jim Byrne, chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. Thank you both.
Thank you.
So, Judith, the words in the statement from Corbett's general counsel that stood out to me were absence of authority. What authority does the DOJ have here, or is Pennsylvania right? And they don't. It's not their jurisdiction.
Right. Well, clearly, I mean, the state of Pennsylvania has a lot of nerve talking about partisan politics behind the motivation. Actually, the Department of Justice has the authority under the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They are on the side of voters, trying to make sure that Pennsylvania's law, which is a clear partisan manipulation of our voting laws, does not stand in the way of the right to vote for African Americans, Latinos, elderly voters, and veterans who are the hardest hit by this law.
Now, Jim, let's say the legal challenges don't work. What sort of preparations has your organization made to, for one thing, make sure people know about it? I mean, I assume almost everybody watches Hardball, but there might be some who've actually slipped through our cracks.
It's possible, and in the event someone has missed your program, we've been working for months on the ground. We've been working for months on the ground to recruit, identify, and outreach those who may be affected. There are many folks in Pennsylvania who, A, don't know about this law, and B, if they do, they're making an assumption that they have proper ID. So as we're going door to door with a variety of groups on the ground who have the same interests we do to ensure that Pennsylvanians can exercise their constitutional right to vote, we're not assuming and taking their word at face value, even if they genuinely think they have what they need. We'll ask to see it, and if it is not in conformity, we'll make sure that we get them squared away so they can vote this fall.
Judith, the Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court, will hear the case on September 13th, which is 64 days before the election. If they rule against your organization and your co-plaintiffs, right? Is there any further recourse, or is that the end of the line?
So, Advancement Project, we are the attorneys in that case, and if we lose, at that point, the law will be implemented. And unfortunately, what's at stake is hundreds of thousands of votes of voters who want to participate because, you know, this is an important election. And clearly, the state GOP knew what it was doing when they put in place this law that would hit Democratic strongholds. They knew that they were suppressing the vote. I mean, our case shows, there's evidence of voter suppression, but there was no evidence of fraud, and we know that the state is not ready to put an ID in the hands of the 760,000 registered voters that don't have the ID.
We played a clip, Jim, from the Pennsylvania House Majority Leader saying really unusually explicitly that this voter ID law is there to help Mitt Romney win. Now, I have to assume that his answer for that is that he's saying that if that wasn't there, then there would be so much voter fraud, despite the fact that there's no evidence of this kind of in-person voter fraud being a factor. But has that statement captured on video as it's been much of an earthquake in Pennsylvania, or has it mainly been written off? Because every time I see it, and I've seen it a number of times now, I'm kind of shocked.
It has had an effect. Mr. Turzai has been known for his off-the-cuff remarks and his inappropriate statements. This time we appreciate the inappropriateness of it for his party, but it is in fact the truth. It is unprofessional and ridiculous and hypocritical for the Corbett administration to say and write what they did to the Department of Justice about politics. I mean, look at what Mr. Turzai said. Governor Corbett, as an attorney general, prosecuted 0 cases. The numbers, as you indicated, are more like 750,000. And they hired a Mitt Romney fundraiser, Chris Bravacos, to do the PR here in Pennsylvania. So, like you said, pot, meet, kettle. And then when Tom Corbett was attorney general, what would he have said, or how would he have reacted to that type of a response to one of his requests for information? It ups the hypocrisy.
Judith Brown Dianis and Jim Burns, thank you both for being here today.
Thank you.
Coming up, Republicans, Paul Ryan among them, want to return America to some version of the gold standard. And that is not a very good idea. We'll get into it next. This is Hardball, the place for politics.